beautiful ride today as we so we are now officially on day 8, so the last day of our Thailand bike ride, and so we'll see that footage over the next couple of days. I'll get Pete to share a little bit more about this leg towards the end as we arrive into Wat Yan Yao. Some of you may already know that place, but it's a beautiful space, a beautiful, significant place for hands, and so Pete will share that a little bit later. But until then, I'm joined by, or we are joined by, the beautiful Sarah Davis, and let me tell you a little bit about Sarah before I hand over to Pete. So Sarah is an adventurer, risk manager, writer, and speaker. After decades in risk management in banking, she decided it was time for a change. She was in search of more meaning and purpose in life and a future that excited her. She decided to go on an expedition down the Nile and subsequently became the first woman to lead an expedition down this mighty river. It was an adventure involving 1,100 kilometres of rafting and then 3,000 kilometres of kayaking that brought Sarah challenges on every level. She then completed a descent of the Murray River, including over 2,400 kilometres of kayaking solo. Absolutely amazing. I think this is going to be an awesome chat. So I am going to hand over to you both to chat through these next 25Ks for everyone.
Thanks, ET. Welcome, Sarah. How are you this morning?
I'm really good, thanks. How are you?
Yeah, excellent. Getting excited by getting close to the finish, and that'll be something that you would certainly know, the excitement and the feeling of coming to the end of something. And, you know, CT's right when she talks about the fact that there'll be people who will miss it. And, you know, love to hear your views later on around, you know, post-adventure blues and how you reintegrate into life and society and family and whatever, you know, that looks like for you after some of the epic stuff. But let's return, we'll go backwards a little bit. You're born in the UK. What age are you when you come to Australia?
I was 32 when I came over here. So I came over here with work. I was working for NAB, and they kind of like, well, what do you want to do next with your career? And I was like, oh, I don't know. And they said, well, you could always go and work somewhere else globally. And I was like, well, okay, that sounds quite cool. And they said, what about Australia? And I'm like, yeah, I haven't been there before. Sounds like a good idea. And yeah, 32, I found myself in Melbourne.
So it's pretty obvious to me, having visited the UK, as to why you'd move and then stay. But what was it for you that you decided to leave, you know, everything behind and make Sydney your home?
Well, I mean, because originally it was supposed to be a 2-year contract. And yeah, that was sort of 17 years ago now. I just, the lifestyle here suits me. And particularly when I moved up to Sydney, I love the beaches. I got involved in North Bondi Surf Club. It's the people, the country, the space, it's the climate. It just felt me, way more me than sort of the life I'd had in the UK. And it was, yeah, it was, you know, you sort of look at a few pivotal points, think we've all got them in our lives, and this was one of the real key ones for me. And it's like, there've been a couple of good decisions, a few bad ones, but some good ones. And yeah, definitely moving to Australia probably tops them out.
Yeah, we've all got some bad decisions, but without bad decisions, you know, perhaps we don't get the good ones as well. Your mum was a real source of inspiration around travel and adventure, is that right?
Yeah, she was. I mean, she did a lot of travel. Like, she went backpacking around Europe with a girlfriend when she was in her, I think it must have been her early 20s. And that's a time like when it wasn't, now it's a kind of rite of passage, like everybody does it. But she was sort of living out of her car and sleeping on the beach and doing all of that. And then she went to South Africa. She had some friends out there, and that was a time when she had to get the boat out there. She was out there for a couple of years. It's actually where she met my father. And I just remember like looking at the photos, and I just be absorbed by them, and these beautiful pictures of some dunes that they'd visited in South Africa with the sun coming up. And she had this block of lava. I can't actually quite remember. I think they came from Lanzarote, and then all the coins from all the countries she'd been to. And I was just fascinated by it. And you know, I don't know, in nature nurture, but it just really fired up this desire to want to travel. And she'd done quite a lot, you know, a few other places as well.
And is there one story, like a read that you know, just inspired by looking through the photos and so forth, and a box of photos? Was there one thing, one story your mum tells that stays with you so strongly today about the travel, and where you went, yeah, I've got to do that?
I think it was more the overall sense I got a bit of, you know, going into the unknown and the experiences. Like I don't think there's really any one that stood out, but it was, yeah, going into really different places, particularly Africa. South Africa just appealed, and I remember hearing about, actually, it's not a story that particularly attracted me to it because I'm terrified of snakes, but she used to say like they'd be careful at barbecues when they was outside, because from some of the trees, like the snakes could just kind of hang down and kind of get you.
Yeah, right.
Or going for hikes and having to be careful where you put your feet because of the spiders and stuff like that. I don't know why that kind of inspired me, because I'm terrified of snakes and spiders. But just here, it's just that the unknown and different options and everything else. I just wanted to experience it.
Yeah. And experience that you had. You've travelled to, the list was 40. Does it remain at 40, or have we gone beyond that in countries that you've travelled through now?
I think it's at 40. I haven't checked it recently. It's either that or it might have just ticked over. It's on a bit of a hold at the moment.
Yeah, aren't we all? Hey, I'm guessing that travel for you doesn't mean resorts and shopping for fake originals to bring home. I get this feeling, Sarah, that there's always something a bit more to your holidays than that.
Yeah, I've always enjoyed the kind of adventure holidays. Through my 20s, I didn't get to experience it. I wanted to, but my boyfriend at the time, he preferred sort of the more traditional kind of holidays or beach ones. And we do sporty stuff, but it was still quite, I don't know, safe is probably the wrong word, but I just always had this real yearning to go and do more bigger and adventurous holidays. So as soon as that relationship was over, you know, I was off for horseback safari in South Africa, trekking up to Annapurna Base Camp, backpacking for 6 weeks around South America. So I just sort of went for it and made up for everything in my 20s. I sort of felt like I'm kind of a decade behind. Like the 20s didn't really do anything. So my 30s, I was doing my 20s, and now in my 40s, I'm doing my 30s, if that makes sense.
Do you think you've caught up?
No, I'm still, I don't know, I'm a kid in a candy store. Now I've started getting into these sort of expeditions and bigger things. It's like, oh my goodness, there's just so many things I want to do. Yeah.
Reading, you know, I was really, the horse ride across the what desert was it? Namibian?
It was up in Namibia, in the north of Namibia. Yeah, that was extraordinary. Like 10 days on horseback, going across this desert and sort of expecting it to be quite bland, but the scenery was changing every day, and because you've sort of got these vast expanses, the ability to go fast, which is what I really enjoyed doing, was there, and it was sore bum, but worth it.
Yeah. I love that when they say, what kind of horse do you want? Your reply was one that goes fast.
Yeah. Everyone else is sort of going, oh, something safe, something nice. One girl said, oh, something fluffy. And I'm like, can I have one that goes fast, please? And they did. They gave me the fastest one. And there was one day where they said, right, you can release your inner cowboy, cowgirl. And at this point, you just go for it. And yeah, me and my horse, bang, he just went, he flew. It was so much fun.
Yeah, I'm attracted to fast horses as well. It's about the pace that someone can walk and hold the rope and walk around the area where you pay your $5 at a fair to have a go on a horse. That's about my limit of speed on a horse. So what was the thing that about that adventure, 8 days riding through the desert, that was the highlight for you?
It was, I mean, I love obviously being on the horses and enjoying that, but also the camping out. So at night we just had sort of beds outside. It was all very nicely done, like with sort of thick doonas in a cover kind of thing. But going to sleep, looking up at the African sky and being able to say, right, I'm not going to sleep until I've seen a shooting star. And every night I would see a shooting star and make a wish.
Yeah.
And it was those kind of things. And there was a day where we got woken up in the night because there was a lion had come quite close, and just thought, as far as he was concerned, he was like, oh my goodness, it's like a buffet because you've got all these horses on a line. And then the next, and we could see the prints were really close and pretty close to where we'd been sleeping, and going out through the dry riverbed the next day with these reeds that were right up next to us. And not knowing where this line was, the guys just said, we can see the tracks, we're relatively close, but we didn't have a choice of where to go. And I don't know, I enjoyed that. It was fun.
Yeah. So you do that, and then you're attracted to do a first. And is it the case that it was the Nile, paddling down that, kayaking down that, and that was what you set your sight on, and that was a first? Or was it the fact that you were in pursuit of a first, and then you sought out and found that the Nile hadn't been kayaked, and you wanted to be the first?
Yeah, I was interested in finding a first. I got to a point where I had a job at the time that I really loved, and it was rewarding, but for me, it wasn't enough. I wanted more purpose and meaning, sense of achievement, all those good things. And while I'd had, fun with my sporting side of things and setting goals with that, and with then these sort of adventurous holidays, it sort of wasn't enough. And then I saw some people who'd done expeditions, and they weren't your classic, I don't know, like Bear Grylls or people who come from that military experience. And, one was a woman who'd done a first, and it was almost like this real visceral response of like, oh my goodness, that's what I want to do. And these two, the people that I'd seen, they'd both done first. And, I'll be honest, my ego liked that. And so I started searching, and I knew I wanted to do paddling. That's, kayaking, surf ski, paddling. That's what I've been doing for a while. So yeah, it was just time to get out Google and see what hadn't been done. People had paddled around Australia and so on and so forth. And then my geography is horrible, so I had to Google what the longest river is. And I was like, oh, the Nile. Also, I love Africa. And then sort of had a look, almost through eyes half shut, to see like, has a woman done that? And no woman had attempted to do the full length of it. So I was just so excited. It was like this sort of ultimate light bulb moment for me. And it was like, right, that's what I want to do. No idea how I'm going to do it, but that's what I want to do. But then as time went on, like the whole sort of the first thing, I realized that wasn't what it was all about for me. It was far more, and it sounds like the cliche, but it's the journey. And even just getting to the start point was just, extraordinary. It was frustrating at times, and lots of obstacles to overcome, but it was amazing, as I say, just before even starting to get paddles on the water.
And by this stage, when you decide that's what you're going to do, you're obviously, because of the work or your involvement with the Surf Club at Bondi, and the Coolangatta events and so forth you've been involved in, this is all preceding the Nile, so you're certainly proficient in a kayak at this stage, yeah? Yeah,
but what I didn't have was...
Sorry, go on.
No, I was just going to say, but what I didn't have was experience in whitewater, and what you had at the start was a lot of whitewater. So I actually, I'd had the idea after booking my Namibian trip, but before I went on it. So I decided to tack on a week and fly up to Uganda and just do a bit of a recce, just to sort of go, before I commit to this, let's have a look at the river, have a look at the whitewater, and before committing to what was obviously, a really huge project to undertake. So I went there and sort of came away from it going, I really want to do this, but I'm really scared. There are rapids there called things like the Dead Dutchman, and you don't have to be Einstein to work out why it's called that. There were just these huge rapids. I'm like, what am I letting myself in for?
Yeah, so it's pretty amazing to launch into that. But what was the time frame from idea, and then you go through all your planning and everything, and logistics, and what's the time frame between idea and when you hit the water for the first time?
It was about 2.5 years, but it was a good 6 months after coming up with the idea before I did the trip to Uganda that I really committed to it. So that was August 2016. I did that trip, came back and like, right, okay, let's start putting this together and start doing more research and finding out what's involved. I naively and very optimistically thought, yeah, I'll be able to organize this in 6 months. I'm a project manager, I can do this. And I was training for Worlds and training for Molokai. But someone I spoke to quite early on, who was a real mentor, you know, gave me advice. He'd done expeditions down the Nile. He said to me, "So the paddling is going to be the easy bit, you know, knowing the thousands of Ks that were involved in that." I'm like, "Are you sure about that?" When I started getting involved in the planning, then I could see where he was coming from. Because you've got all these different countries to go through, different governments. Nothing is documented. There's no nice wiki of how to do an expedition down the Nile. You know, it was a lot of learning, all the equipment, training that needed to be done. Yeah, it was a very steep learning curve.
And in the planning, in that period of time from commitment and perhaps after the first 6 months, was there a point where you went, yeah, maybe not?
No. I mean, there was times I was like, God, this is how I go. It was one of, like I said, it was all like this, every cell in my body was like, this is the right thing to do. And yeah, I knew I had to try and sort of give it my all. And because if I didn't, I knew I'd regret it.
Yeah. So your corporate background is in risk management and so forth. So, you know, it's kind of, it's almost a contradiction in one way where I guess, you know, the experience of risk helps you undoubtedly in the planning and redundancy preparation and all of that kind of stuff. But, you know, I think when we think of risk, generally we think of that they're quite risk adverse. Was it that your planning just gave you the real confidence that you considered the risks and then planned for them?
Yeah, absolutely. It was a really valuable process, and you know, sort of it created boundaries around what I was getting into. Otherwise, you know, by going through and doing the risk assessment, which is exactly the same as I do through work, you know, what's everything, you know, it sounds very negative, but what's everything that could go wrong? And what's the impact if it does? Like, what are the consequences and how likely is that? And then working out, okay, what can we do to reduce the risk down to an acceptable level and to a point where I'm willing to accept it? So it sort of created this real boundaries around what I was getting into. It helped to unpack some of the fears. I think, you know, our fears are sort of reality, which then gets blown out of perspective with all these assumptions you put on top. When you go through a very structured program like that, you kind of unpack it and you get it back down to the reality. You know, it doesn't completely get rid of the fears, but you get a bit of better perspective on them. So it was a good process to go through, and it definitely did give me more confidence about what I was doing. But I still went into it, you know, there was a lot of self-doubt and worry, and, you know, it's a very severe risks of potentially not coming out of it in one piece was something I walked into with open eyes and accepted. Yeah.
And it's the task of kayaking down the world's longest river. It's not the case that just because of the nature of the river that you could get on and start paddling at the mouth and in your kayak and take that same vessel all the way down. There was the whitewater rafting, which was 1,100 Ks, and then the kayaking at 3,000 Ks plus else. How did you deal with or embrace the two different aspects? And was the whitewater rafting more enjoyable than the kayaking, or how did that play out for you?
Yeah, but I chose to do the rafting to begin with because, I mean, you could whitewater kayak it, but you'd need support with you. There's the risks of the wildlife risk is one. You've got hippos and crocs through there. And then I'm not, as I said, I don't have experience in big whitewater, so I wasn't willing to take that on. So I decided to do it in the raft. And where I'd gone on the recce, the owner of Nile River Explorers very kindly lent me gear. He spoke to one of his, because I really wanted local teams with me. And he spoke to one of his rafting guides, who's one of the few people who'd actually joined another expedition to go down the Akagera in the Naiborongo and Akagera in Rwanda from the source. And this guy, Paolo, then got a couple of other rafting guides to do it as well. So yeah, I was really not looking forward to that section, I have to say. I thought I was not going to enjoy it because of the rapids, and I was looking forward more to the physical challenge of the kilometers, being sort of more of an endurance athlete, and the mental challenges that come with that. You know, yes, I did enjoy that section, but I actually enjoyed the first section way more than I was expecting, and there was a lot of drama and things did go wrong, but I enjoyed that so much more than I thought I would do.
Because they're two completely different things, aren't they? Like, it's whitewater rafting. It's almost a case of navigating this raft, you know, with the flow and the energy, and working with the energy of the water that's taking you down, where, you know, once that is gone, then it is very much down to that endurance, creating your own momentum through the paddling.
Absolutely. We still, even in the raft, like there was some very, very long sections of flat water. It sort of had mixed emotions. Part was like happy when we got to some rapids. It was like, right, we're going to go a little bit quicker. The boys, we had a set of sort of frame and oars on the rafts. Well, I'd actually got into it with a shoulder injury, which wasn't ideal. I couldn't, the oars were just so heavy, but these boys like that. So I'd just be up front. There'd be two of us up front paddling, that I could do, you know, just change sides each day. The boys would be on these oars for like 3 hours at a time. It was, you know, I had to go, and they would just look so beautiful and rhythmic because they're sort of standing up doing this. And when I did it, I don't know, it was like the Bridget Jones version of doing it. It was not pretty and it was not effective at all.
Yeah, right. So tell us about, you had an encounter with a hippo, yeah?
We did. We'd literally been on the river, what was it, day 6, and we woke up. So we were just actually on the outskirts of Kigali. So we'd walked into the source, gone down river a little bit from where we could put on the raft, started on the river, got into our flow over those few days. And then, day 6, we woke up and just heard the noise of a hippo making its way upstream. So we got on, you know, we all heard it, and you know, there's a real tension in the air and apprehension. So we got going, we got to our first pod of hippos, and the idea is you go around them and they'll generally leave you alone. The problem that we had on this river is it was still relatively narrow, so there wasn't a lot of space to go around. You had some short, steep banks, so you couldn't see what was around the next corner, and it was really windy. So we were going along. There was a left bend coming up, followed by a right bend soon after. And as we're coming up, we go sort of going around the left, in the corner of the opposite bank, this baby hippo pops up in the shallows. So we stopped paddling. And before I could get the words out, we drifted along because there was, you know, the current taking us. Mum pops up on the right. So we've then drifted between mum and baby, and I mean, you don't need to be an expert to know that that's a really, really bad idea. So she lost it, right? We're then back on the oars and paddles trying to get away from her. She charges us, she catches up, she put her head underneath and tried to flip the raft, but with 4 of us, all our equipment to frame the oars, it was too heavy, even though they are very powerful animals. So she stopped, had a bit of a rethink, came at us again, like we're still desperately trying to get to the riverbank to safety. And I just felt, because I'm up front sort of paddling away, I felt this almighty tug look behind me, and there is this massive hippo, and she'd bitten into the back of the raft. She caught up with us and bitten in. So she, you know, she was out to do a lot of damage, as much damage as she could. I think, I don't know whether it was then obviously a lot of air would have come out, there would have been a bit of a pop, or whether she realized that she was a little bit away from her baby. She let go, and we were just close enough to be able to get to the riverbank then to get out, and she backed off a little bit more. So yeah, we were sort of standing on the riverbank all a little bit like, what the hell just happened there? And we had to pull the raft out, unpack everything, and there was a hole literally like this where she put her teeth in, and the boys had to spend like an hour and a half, you know, really well patching that back up. You know, at the time when it happened, I think in those moments of real sort of white fear, that in its pure primal response at that point.
Yeah.
There's no space for thinking. But once we'd stopped and got off the river, and the reality of that risk that I'd accepted of being attacked by a hippo, the theory on a spreadsheet is obviously very, very different to the reality of turning around and seeing a hippo there, and knowing that we were just at the start of dealing with the hippos. So luckily one of the guys, Peter, he was really good at rethinking options and didn't panic under stress. And he said, okay, what we need to do going forward is if we see a hippo, we stop where we can, we get off the river, leave the raft in there and tow the raft past, because we've just then got that bit of space between us and them, because the river was so narrow. And within an hour we had to do that. We came around the corner and there was this big bull male hippo, and he put on this psychotic display when he saw us, like opening and closing with the jaws, snorting, jumping up and down, scattering excrement with his tail, and we did exactly that, towed the raft past and got back underway. So I'm not a big fan of hippos.
You talk about that adrenaline kicking in when mum bites the back of the raft, and it's just all hands on deck, and it's paddle for all you're worth to get away, and it's that survival stuff. But there's a time where that adrenaline goes and you start to think about it and process it. And talk me through that, and then talk me through, once you're in that space, then coming around and then being confronted with more, where the adrenaline's not there, and you've got the episode with mum, deeply fresh in your mind.
Yeah, I mean, just the reality of facing, having an effectively, a close to death kind of experience. Yeah. It was very, obviously very, very confronting, and just the fear getting back on that river. While I didn't think about backing down, I just, at the same time, I didn't want to get back on. It was just so terrifying what we'd gone through. Yeah. As I said to you, I've never considered myself particularly courageous. But at that moment, that was the first time I go, I feel like I'm being quite brave now as I get back on the water, because I was so scared, so scared. And, but the boys gave me confidence, and that made such a difference. And I think, it's having the right teams around you and people who give you that confidence. And as I say, Peter was amazing. Like, we had some other incidents where, we had a hippo, we couldn't tow it past, kind of thing. We could just stand in the papyrus, but we couldn't get past it. And he watched it and he observed this thing, and it would come up because it had started following us, and it was a big hippo. And then it would go under the water and then come back up again. And he's like, okay, next time it goes under the water, we get back in the raft, we wait. Then when it goes back down again, we paddle in stealth mode. And it worked. Yeah. And he was just, I'm not very good at those real pressure moments of coming up with alternatives. So the team I had around me helped give me the confidence. And then I did find myself getting into this, constantly being stressed about, is there a hippo, is there a hippo, is there a hippo? And I had to talk myself back into, Sarah, you know your mantra, control the controllables. You can't control whether a hippo is going to come up. And constantly stressing about it is taking away, it's just sucking all the enjoyment out of the trip for something that the stressing isn't helping. It isn't going to stop a hippo coming up. And I just had to go, so you've accepted this, go with it, and trust the fact that you've got a plan, you've got a good team around you. What will be, either that or we get off the river. And doing that and having that, a real internal chat with myself did help.
Yeah. And what was the, in your risk matrix, what was the solution for the scenario of hippo comes up and bites the ass out of the raft?
Well, I didn't have that necessarily there was a hippo attack and there was a hole in the raft, and it was just like, we just had the two risks sort of compounding together. So having, all the stuff there ready to prepare the raft was key, and the guys know what to do.
Yeah. So you transition from the raft, from the whitewater onto the kayak, something a bit more familiar with you. Talk us through what a day looks like and you've obviously got a land-based crew of some descriptor. You're on the water on your own for the whole time. Are the people joining you? Talk us through that end of the journey in the kayak.
Yeah, I mean, it was a real, the rest of the trip. So we finished in Uganda. So we'd done Rwanda, Tanzania, Uganda, had to unfortunately skip South Sudan, one because of the situation that was going on there. I had hoped to do a small section, but I'd engaged a team who were giving me intel reports every day, who I checked in with someone every day. They were keeping an eye out on social media and the dark web and the web and chat rooms for anyone talking about me. So we did have people with form for kidnapping actually talking about me, which gave things an extra zest. And then they found out that the National Intelligence Security Service in South Sudan were a bit sus about what I was doing, which I can understand. And there was rumours that they were thinking about detaining me. So I had to make the call of sort of going up to Sudan, and I was disappointed not to get sort of the gradual transition, sort of going into Sudan. And it was a real, such a change, totally different culture. It was an interesting time to be there because they were on the verge of, or they were trying to overthrow the government that had been, al-Bashir, who'd been in for nearly 30 years. But I had an amazing crew. I'd done another recce out to Sudan and Egypt before kicking off, and have met the Sudanese kayaking or the rowing and canoe club, and they're amazing at helping me. So we broke it into sort of two sections. It was almost like a warm-up section from the south of Khartoum back to Khartoum, which is about 300 k's. So for that, I had one of their elite paddlers with me, and then someone is wonderful Syrian guy, Fahad. He came along and provided ground support for that, and then also swapped in occasionally and had a go at paddling. And I was really stoked to be back in the kite. Sort of, it felt way more like we're back in comfort zone again, and looking forward to the physical challenge of doing these big Ks. So I really enjoyed that. And then there was the much longer stretch from Khartoum up to the border with Egypt to Wadi Halfa, which was about 1,500 kilometers. And for that, I was quite happy to go with someone, and we would just be self-supported. But the club really wanted me to have someone with me, which was great. So we engaged a boat to come with me. So we actually had boat support, because there's a lot of areas where it'd be quite hard for a car to get in. Yeah. And it was great. I mean, yes, it would be nice to have been self-supported. There's that side of things. I got to do that in Egypt, but it meant that, there was a boat there next to us and we could just chuck everything on there. It made food supplies really easy because we could just put loads of stuff when we got to the big towns. And we gradually got into a routine where it would be get up, trying to get the guy being warned that the Sudanese aren't really morning people, which was the case. Whereas I just wanted to get up, like, right, let's get going, and it just took ages to try. And it was only when it became their idea that maybe we needed to get up earlier because we was just taking so long. Then it was like a good idea. I've been trying to do this for like weeks now. So we get up and get on the water, and so basically paddle 3 hours, half an hour's rest, paddle 3 hour, half an hour rest, paddle 2 or 3 hours and finish for the day. And there we were. It was all wilderness camping. It was just beautiful through there. You're literally, paddling through the Sahara, the world's biggest hot desert. And it's, slightly surreal where you've got these sand dunes coming down to the river that you're paddling on. And it was beautiful, absolutely beautiful.
And tell us, as you get towards the end of the journey, what was that like to finish? And then, we talk about, finishing something and it can create a void. Was that the case for you? And how did you deal with it? How long did it go on for, if it was in fact the case?
Yeah. Getting to the end, I had real mixed emotions. Like 2 days before finishing, I'd had food poisoning and been in hospital, which is quite an interesting experience on a drip, and had to sort of like break the last day in two. And I was really sort of emotionally quite wobbly on that last day. I think it was a tiredness that, having dealt with uncertainty, I'd been in Africa 7 months, close to 7 months by then, sort of on the go, on and off. Like, there'd been lots of breaks in between, like organising the next section. 6 months, a lot of uncertainty, all the problems every day, you know, like there's problems to solve and overcome. And so when I got to the end, you know, I was so happy, you know, to have achieved it, to have done it. You know, this thing that had been my goal for 2 years in the prep and all those months in Africa. There was that sense of achievement and fulfillment, but there was also sadness. You know, there was sadness that I was going to have to say goodbye to this beautiful river and this thing that had been my goal for so long. But I think underlying it, there was a lot of relief. You know, it had been tough, and everyone had told me, you know, you can expect the post-expedition blues. I didn't experience. I actually went over to my mum's in the UK. I hadn't seen her for a little while, and basically just had 5 weeks there, catching up with some friends, but just enjoying the food that I enjoy, healthy food, and just being still. I really enjoyed just being still for a little while, and confident, knowing that I was going to go on and do more expeditions. And I'd already had some ideas in my head, and then speaking to other people, I came up with new ideas. And yeah, I was ready for it to come to an end, which is nice. It's a nice place to be.
Oh, absolutely. And I'm assuming that one of those ideas was eventually to return home and take on the Murray River, all 2,500 kilometres of it. A paddle that you did this year, yeah?
Yeah, so I did that over December and January and finished to the middle of February. So it was a total of 60 days on the go and about 56 from when I started kayaking.
Yeah, and tell me, what did you see the transition? Did you get the rains that changed that, or were you off there before the rain came and the water flowed in those higher reaches again?
Yeah, unfortunately, I was pre the rains. So we did with some people who, because I'm not an experienced bushwalker, so I had some people guide me into the source, and we did some bush bashing for a few days, like aiming to stay within a stone's throw of the river, and then had to skip a small section because it would normally be white water, but it was just too low. And it was just before the bushfires kind of came through there as well. So then I got on the river at Cancoban, and yeah, the water levels were low. So I would have to keep, until I got to the Hume reservoir and the dam there was a lot of like paddle 100 Ks, get out, drag the kayak across the shallow water, get back in, paddle 50 meters, get back out. You know, I'd be in and out of my kayak so many times a day. It made it really challenging. So, I mean, there were a few days of rain, but it was more the hot weather, and then had the, once I got closer to the border with South Australia, started getting the dust storms.
Yeah. And that's a journey of 2,500 kilometres. Yeah, I guess you got to see 2,500 or 2,400 kilometres of Australia that just so many people, and a perspective not dissimilar to what we get on the bike. Is it takes you to places at a speed and interaction with people that you just wouldn't do in any other transport. And I guess, you know, paddling down the Murray, it's similar, hey?
Yeah, absolutely. It is a really unique perspective and a pace that you're going at. And it was, you know, once I got away, doing it over summertime, if anyone's thinking about paddling the Murray, I wouldn't recommend necessarily doing it in summertime where you've got all the holiday makers there and their speedboats and jet skis. Once I got past one of the reservoirs, and then was suddenly in one of the national forests, and it was just beautiful. It was so quiet, and you've got all the birds and the kangaroos and all the other animals, and then these beautiful sort of sandbanks and beaches to just rock up at night, throw the tent up and have dinner. It was really beautiful.
And I was just looking at the footage as you were talking there of the ride, and I thought, well, this is not something you had to deal with. I thought the vision had frozen, but we're actually stopped at traffic lights, and not too many of them on Murray, yeah.
It didn't have to stop at the lock, so maybe that's the equivalent.
Yeah. How was the finish competing that here in Australia compared to the Nile? How did you feel about both? Is there one that had a deeper impact upon you than the other? And if so, what was it and why?
The Nile definitely had a bigger impact. It had been so much more to it, as I say, even to get to the start line, and everything that had been involved in getting to that point where I got to the finish line. Not to take away from the Murray trip, I was very happy to get to the end, and again had that sense of achievement. But it had been mentally, I'd found it a lot tougher because it hadn't been. Yes, I was really passionate about doing it, but not to the same level as the Nile. So the why behind it wasn't as strong. And I think when we've got that real sense of meaning and purpose, it's that why kind of acts like a buffer. So when you're sort of suffering and it's hard going, it buffers you against that. And because it wasn't as strong for the Murray, doing those like massively long days in the heat, sometimes in the cold, I found it tougher. So I was, again, really happy and also quite relieved to get to the end.
And you ended in February. Was there any desire, knowing that you're stepping into a world full of coronavirus, was there any desire to go back to the start and say, let me just do this again and let you get everything in society sorted out and I'll come back when you've got this under control?
No, I think it was just before the whole corona thing kicked off. I think, part of it would probably would have been quite good to do over, if I'd done it starting in March or February, it would have probably been a great thing to do through COVID until the borders shut down anyway. So yeah, no, I was kind of happy to be back in my home, and yeah, still able to go out and kayak on the harbour and out of Bondi, so it was all good.
Yeah. And is there something that you're personally or publicly ready to declare what's next? I imagine that might involve paddling some long rivers on different continents. Would I be on the money?
Yeah, I mean, I do want to do a source to sea on each continent, not the longest river on each continent, probably find ones that are more interesting. But I do have something, because obviously at the moment I can't plan anything overseas. Luckily we live in an amazing country where, you're never going to run out of adventures and things to do. So I haven't publicly shared this one before, so we can have it here first. The plan is, and everyone here will probably appreciate this one, is to cycle across Australia.
Okay, all right. And have you got a date that you're thinking about, a year or so forth at this stage, Sarah?
No, I'm gonna start this, hopefully, all being well. I'm doing it with a friend, but all being well, we'll kick it off on the 1st of October.
Of this year?
Yeah.
And how long are you giving yourself?
Want to try and do it in 2 months.
Okay, well that'll be good, because we'll be back speaking with you in June next year when we do the virtual cycle again, and we'll have you to share something that maybe a few on this call can relate to a bit more of cycling, and we'll hear that journey. Been great to speak with you and hear about the amazing adventures that you've been part of, and may COVID end, the borders open up, and we can all get back and do the things that provide food for our souls. So thanks for joining us, Sarah. I'll hand back to CT to wrap up the last for today on our penultimate day.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Sarah. Thank you, Pete. It was a great chat, and I think after every interview, my head just ticks over and over and goes, what can we do that's just completely crazy and fun and adventurous? So stay tuned. There could be something. But no, Sarah, thank you so much for sharing and for being generous with your time today. I know that our groups love the interviews, and there's some comments coming in there. One from Renee. I don't know what that was in regards to. That
was being chased by the hippo.
Right.
Yes.
Right. An expletive that I cannot repeat. But before we hand over, and Sarah, feel free, you can either stay on to listen to this piece, but feel free to jump off if you need to go. But before we jump off the bikes today, I just thought it'd be really significant for Pete to share where we've just finished riding. So we've just ridden into a place called Wat Yan Yao, and it's a really significant spot for Hands, for the Hands story. And I think, you know, it'd be remiss of us not to share that. So Pete,
sure.
back to you. And yeah, Sarah, like I said, feel free to stay, or if you do need to go, we'll say goodbye.
Thanks, guys. I'll see you later. Thanks so much for having me.
Thanks,
See you, Sarah.
Sarah.
Bye. Yeah, thanks, guys. As those of you who have ridden will know that Wat Yan Yao is indeed a special place for us. It's the end for all purposes of the Southern Ride. And Wat Yan Yao is a temple, and it's just north of Bantham Nam Chai at Takua Pa. And it became ground zero with all of the bodies, and there was 3,500 bodies were taken to this temple and laid on the ground and were in an advanced state of decomposition. And it's where our work started with the identification and repatriation of both Thai nationals and foreign nationals, returning those bodies to those around the world and in Thailand. And it's really a significant site for us. It's where we come to all but the last kilometre and a half of the Southern Ride, and it's a very spiritual place and has a lot of meaning. What we'd know, or what I'd learn later on, is that while I was there working and processing and helping in the identification of the bodies, is that there would be staff from our home that we work with now who were there at the same time searching for their loved ones. And Nong, one of our staff at BTN, our paths would cross without us knowing it. She lost her 3 children and her husband in the tsunami, and she was there searching while I was there. So it's certainly a very meaningful time for us. It's a really nice way to finish the Southern Ride. We'll have had 8 days on the bike by that stage, or 5 days if you're doing a corporate ride, and we get time to reflect on the ride and the meaning and the loss and the history. So it's a special day, and now all we've got is a ride on to Bantham Nam Chai and see the kids, and that's what we're doing tomorrow. So hopefully you can join us and be back for the finish and see Game and the kids tomorrow. We've got a chat in the morning, because the kids won't be up at 4 o'clock to greet us, but at lunchtime the kids will be there. So look forward to seeing you tomorrow for the last of our days in our first Ride to Provide virtual challenge. Have a great day, and we'll see you then. Bye.